The crowd was deafening, 20,000 voices rising as one, trying to hold on to something they knew they'd never see again. His name echoed through the arena like it had for 2 decades, each syllable soaked in nostalgia and reverence. A man who'd given everything, standing at center stage for the last time. Cameras flashed, jerseys waved, and somewhere between the cheers, he managed to smile. But the truth? He was already gone. They called it a perfect ending. One last buzzer beater. One final heroic moment. The stuff of documentaries and highlight reels. Fans cried. Teammates lifted him on their shoulders. Commentators called him immortal. But no one talked about the moment after. The locker room, when the noise stopped. The silence of folding a jersey for the last time, knowing you'll never wear it again. The handshakes from executives who once fought to sign you, now just trying to wrap up a photo op. The slow walk to the car, where no reporters waited. Just darkness, just silence. He sat in the driver's seat and stared straight ahead, not at traffic, not at the rearview mirror, just blank. The world was celebrating his legacy, and he was already mourning his life, because no one prepares you for this part. No one tells you that retirement, no matter how glorious, can feel like a funeral for your identity. He didn't retire because he wanted to. He retired because he had to. His knees screamed in pain every morning. His body no longer obeyed. But his mind was still lacing up, still drawing plays in the shower, still hearing the crowd in his sleep. What haunted him most wasn't the fear of being forgotten. It was the fear of being normal. A man who once had a nation, holding his breath, now stood in a grocery store line behind people who had no idea what he gave up to be great. They said he went out on top, but only he knew the truth. Going out on top still meant going out alone. The media ran specials for weeks, the farewell of a legend, a career for the ages. But after the headlines faded, so did the calls, the endorsements, the interviews. The agents who once hounded him went silent. The franchise he carried for 15 years didn't even retire his number. They just moved on. That's the business, and yet, the image stuck in people's heads was of a smiling champion walking into the sunset, waving at fans, proud and fulfilled. No one saw the night that followed. No one saw the living room, dark, quiet, littered with boxes of memorabilia that no longer had a place. No one saw the man sitting on the edge of his bed, still wearing the final jersey, unable to take it off, because to take it off would be to admit it was really over. Long before the arenas, before the sponsors, before the roar of packed stadiums, there was just obsession. Not love, not passion. Obsession. He wasn't born into greatness. He clawed his way to it. Early mornings on crack courts, practicing jump shots until his fingers bled. Weight rooms in high school basements, lifting alone while others went to parties. Coaches didn't always notice. Scouts overlooked him, but he didn't care, because he didn't play for recognition. He played to escape poverty, escape chaos, escape insignificance, and it worked. He became a machine, fast, fearless, efficient. While other kids learned balance, he learned sacrifice. While they talked about dreams, he mapped out domination. Every calendar year was just another season, every birthday, a checkpoint. No vacations, no room for softness, only structure, only work. The sport became more than his life. It became his language. On the court, everything made sense. There were rules, boundaries, logic, a place where pain had purpose, where hurt could be channeled into winning, where aggression was rewarded and doubt didn't exist. But when you build yourself like that, wired for pressure, calibrated for war, what happens when the war ends? No one teaches that part. He wasn't just trained to win games. He was trained to suppress everything unrelated to performance, emotions, a liability, vulnerability, a weakness. If you were injured, you played through it. If you were hurting, you buried it. That's what champions do. That's how you survive at the top. And he did survive. For over a decade, he outlasted younger, faster, stronger players. Why? Because he had no off switch. He was relentless. The kind of guy you hated to face and loved to have on your team. Coaches praised his discipline. Teammates admired his toughness. Fans called him fearless. But they didn't know that fearlessness came with a price. The painkillers before games, the ice baths after, the silent panic attacks in hotel rooms, the growing distance from friends who didn't understand why he couldn't be present, the failed marriage, the estranged daughter, the therapist he never called because athletes don't do therapy, they grind. Even his greatness became a prison, because once you're seen as a machine, no one checks if the gears are breaking. They just expect you to keep running. Retirement was supposed to be freedom, but for men like him, freedom feels like failure. Without the routine, the rituals, the pressure, he felt disarmed, like a soldier dropped into civilian life with no instructions. His calendar, once color-coded with practice, travel, and games, was now blank. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was deafening. He tried to fill the hours with workouts, then with media gigs, then with nothing, and still, something gnawed at him. A voice in the back of his head whispering, "This isn't who you are, you're wasting away." Because for so long, who he was the game, and now that it was gone, all that remained was a man trained for battle, standing quietly in a world that no longer needed him. It doesn't hit all at once. At first, it's subtle. The mornings feel longer, the phone rings less, the invitations dry up. You tell yourself it's just an adjustment, a new chapter. You repeat those words like affirmations. I'm more than just an athlete. I've got a whole life ahead of me, but deep down, a part of you is screaming, then why do I feel dead inside? For years, he had lived on a stage. Every move mic'd up, recorded, replayed in slow motion. He didn't just play the game. He performed it. He gave people moments. He gave them something to believe in, and in return, they gave him applause. That applause, it became everything. It was his fuel, his proof, his escape. When the crowd erupted, it silenced the noise in his head. It numbed the pain in his body. It made the sacrifices feel worth it. But now there was no crowd, no locker room banter, no post-game interviews where reporters hung on his every word. There was just quiet. He didn't realize how addicted he'd become. Not to fame, not to money, to significance. Because the game gave him purpose. The game gave him identity. And more than anything, the game gave him attention. He'd walk into restaurants and feel invisible. Kids used to line up for autographs. Now they asked their parents, "Who's that?" The same fans who once screamed his name now scrolled past his face like he was part of a history book. It's not bitterness. It's something deeper. Disorientation. Like waking up in a house you no longer recognize. His name, once chanted by thousands, was now reduced to a whisper in his own mind. He tried to recreate the feeling, did podcasts, sat on panels, joined a sports network as a guest analyst, smiled for the camera, told funny stories from the old days. But when the lights turned off, so did he. No amount of lights, makeup, or microphones could replicate that feeling of stepping onto the court with everything on the line, of knowing millions were watching, of hearing the crowd feel every move you made. At night, he'd rewatch old clips, not to relive the wins, but to remember who he used to be. The way the crowd rose when he hit a shot, the way his teammates swarmed him, the way the world seemed to care. He started posting more on social media, training clips, motivational quotes, old photos, not for the algorithm but for connection, for acknowledgement. But it never felt the same. Likes aren't cheers, comments aren't crowds, because when the applause stops, the silence isn't neutral, it's hostile. It forces you to ask questions you don't want to answer. Who am I without this? Do I still matter? Was any of it real? Applause, it turns out, isn't just a reward. It's a drug. And now, he was going through withdrawal with no rehab, no playbook, and no one who truly understood just how hard it is to come down from the highest high the world has to offer. There's a price for greatness, and he paid it in full plus interest. To the world, his name was stitched into the fabric of sports history. The record books bore his signature. Fans wore his number. Commentators called him a once-in-a-generation player. But what they didn't see, what they never wanted to see, was what he gave up to become that legend. Start with the body. By the end of his career, waking up meant pain, knees that crunched, ankles that cracked, fingers that no longer straightened. He hadn't run without limping since his late 20s. Every season, he pushed through stress fractures, torn ligaments, concussions, not because he wanted to, because sitting out wasn't an option, not for a franchise player, not for someone carrying expectations on his back. He played hurt because he feared irrelevance more than he feared injury. The surgeries added up, so did the pills, cortisone, anti-inflammatories, painkillers, sleep aids. He memorized dosages like playbooks. Nobody asked questions as long as he delivered, and he did. But the toll wasn't just physical, it was personal. He missed his daughter's first steps, her first words, her school plays. Birthdays became Zoom calls. Vacations became cancellations. Holidays were spent in hotel rooms with ice packs taped to his knees. His family stopped asking when he'd be home. They knew the answer after the season. But the season never really ended. Off-season was just preseason for the next grind. His wife tried. She really did. But eventually, she stopped competing for his attention because she knew she'd lose every time to the game. Love requires presence, and he was never fully present. Not mentally, not emotionally, not even when he was physically there. When the divorce papers came, he didn't fight. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to be a husband anymore. He'd only ever known how to be a competitor. Legacy, they say, is forever. But they never tell you it costs you now. Even in the locker room, the camaraderie was surface level. Everyone had agendas. Friends were transactional. Agents, trainers, handlers, they all cared. As long as you were producing, and when you stopped producing, they disappeared. He remembered being in the trainer's room one night, hooked up to for fluids after a brutal game, barely able to lift his head. A young rookie walked by, earbuds in, didn't even nod. The future had arrived and it didn't include him. The team didn't offer him a front office role after retirement. No statue, no banner, just a carefully worded press release and a montage video. The same people who once called him the heart of the franchise now discussed him like a relic. He had become a ghost in a world he once ruled. This was the cost, not just the bruises or the broken relationships. The real cost was being built for a purpose so specific, so narrow, that once it was gone there was nothing left to stand on. And as he sat alone in his empty condo, watching another young star take the court wearing his old number, he realized something brutal. Legacy is worshipped by fans, but it survived alone. The silence wasn't new, but now it was permanent. At first, there were still flashes. Old teammates texting clips, fans tagging him in tribute posts, a local TV station inviting him to sit courtside for Legends Night. But it didn't last. Time moved on. So did the game. The league he once owned barely mentioned his name now. He thought the memories would keep him warm. They didn't. His days blurred together. Wake up, stretch, coffee, scroll, stare. The man who once trained 6 hours a day now took 2 hours to convince himself to leave the apartment. He didn't need to anymore. No practice, no shoot-arounds, no press conferences, just empty time and an unshakable feeling that the world had closed the door behind him. He tried business ventures, opened a gym, invested in a startup, but he wasn't built for boardrooms. He couldn't fake the small talk, couldn't nod through meetings filled with people who respected the brand, not the man behind it. He had money, enough to never work again. But what no one tells you is that financial freedom feels hollow when you've lost emotional structure. He wasn't bored, he was untethered, ungrounded, stripped of the rhythm that had once dictated his every breath. The hardest part wasn't being forgotten. It was being remembered, but only in past tense. Fans would come up to him and say things like, "Man, you were my childhood," or "I used to love watching you play," and every time, the smile would crack a little more. Because what they didn't realize is that they were confirming what he feared most, that his best moments were already behind him. He missed the brotherhood, the private jokes in the locker room, the tension before tip-off, the adrenaline of being part of something bigger than himself. Now, he was just another former athlete trying to stay relevant, a guest speaker at camps, a guest analyst on networks, a guest in a world he used to dominate. He visited the arena once on invitation, walked through the tunnel in a tailored suit instead of sneakers. Fans clapped. Some still wore his jersey. But when the game started, no one looked at him again. He sat quietly, eyes fixed on the floor, heartbeat chasing memories that wouldn't come back. After the game, no one asked for a quote. No one asked for advice. He shook a few hands and walked to his car alone. That night, he didn't sleep. He just stared at the ceiling and whispered one word to himself. Now what? Because no one prepares you for the long life after the short glory, for the fact that you'll still have 40, maybe 50 years left to live, and no idea who you are without the game. This was a part of retirement no one showed. Not in documentaries, not in speeches, not in jersey retirements. The part where the lights go out, and you realize you were never taught how to live in the dark. He stopped counting the days. There was no point. One day bled into the next. The calendar on his fridge hadn't been flipped in 3 months. Time was no longer broken into seasons, training camps, or road trips. It was just passing, and with every tick, he felt himself fading into something smaller, something forgettable. For a while, He disappeared. He ignored calls, stopped posting, didn't show up for interviews, not because he was bitter, but because he had nothing left to say. He wasn't chasing a second act. He wasn't chasing anything. Until the night he almost didn't come back. It wasn't a dramatic scene. No bottles, no letters, just a quiet drive, a highway exit missed on purpose, a moment of stillness on a bridge where the sound of water below felt louder than any crowd he'd ever played for. He didn't jump, but he didn't go home either, not for a while. Instead, he drove until the sun came up, parked on the side of a mountain trail he hadn't seen in years, laced up old shoes, started walking. No destination, just movement. For the first time in months, he wasn't trying to be anyone, not an athlete, not a brand, not a legend, just a man who needed to feel his heartbeat for something other than grief. And somewhere between the trees, with sweat stinging his eyes and pain in every step, he realized what he'd forgotten. The fight wasn't about the game. It was about survival. It always had been. The game was just the arena, but the fight that came from within, and that part of him, that wasn't gone. It was just buried beneath years of applause, pressure, and expectation. Now stripped of it all, he finally saw what was left, and it was nothing. He started small. Morning walks, reading, journaling, therapy, a conversation with his daughter, honest, painful, necessary, a letter to his ex-wife, no agenda, just apology. Slowly, the armor came off, and in its place, something terrifying began to grow. Vulnerability, not weakness, strength, real strength. Eventually, he took a coaching gig, not at a pro team, a small high school in a city no one cared about. He didn't take it for the money or the clout. He took it because those kids reminded him of who he used to be, lost, hungry, angry, searching for purpose in a game that could give or take everything. And maybe, just maybe, if he could teach them how to fight the right battles, not for applause, but for themselves, then none of it would have been in vain. He still missed the crowd, the lights, the chaos. But now, he didn't need it. He had found something heavier than fame, more permanent than trophies, something the game could never give and retirement could never take away. Peace. It wasn't loud, it didn't cheer, but it stayed, and for the first time in his life, that was enough.